Coming up on Network Africa. Authorities in Uganda declare the school where children were killed in a fire a crime scene. Burkina Faso recruits civilians to fight jihadists. An AU mediation team arrives in South Africa as Ethiopia peace talks commence. Welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. We begin in Uganda, where the country's Interior Minister, Kahinda Otafiri, has said that the school where 11 children died in a fire has been cordoned off as a crime scene. He suggests that the blaze could have been started intentionally. Earlier this year, police reported 18 school fires over a period of 3 months. Most were said to have been started deliberately. Burkina Faso's military ruler, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, has appointed a government of 23 ministers. The new cabinet is to run the country until civilian rule is restored in July 2024. It will be led by Prime Minister Apollinaire Joachim Kielem de Tembela, a 64-year-old lawyer who was appointed to the post over the weekend. The new cabinet is composed of 5 ministers from the former cabinet of Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, the coup leader overthrown in a subsequent coup in September. The 2 military officers occupy the key ministers of defense and security. The new cabinet includes 5 women. Olivia Ruamba remains foreign affairs minister. Meanwhile, Burkina Faso's military rulers have launched a drive to recruit tens of thousands of civilian volunteers to help fight Islamist extremists. The commander of the force, called Volunteers for the Defense of the Fatherland, said the aim is to enlist 35,000 new members. Candidates will receive 2 weeks of military training before taking part in operations across the country, which has been battling a jihadist insurgency since 2015. Elsewhere, the first formal peace talks aimed at ending 2 years of war between the Ethiopian army and forces from the country's northern region of Tigray has entered its second day in South Africa's capital, Pretoria. The talks are being attended by the African Union mediation team led by former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, supported by former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta and former Deputy President of South Africa, Phumzile Mlambo Nguka. United Nations and the United States representatives are participating as observers. At stake is an opportunity to end a conflict that has killed thousands of people, displaced millions, and left hundreds of thousands on the brink of famine in Africa's second most populous nation, destabilizing the wider Horn of Africa region. The Tigrayan delegates have said that the focus at the talks in South Africa would be on an immediate cessation of hostilities, unfettered access to Tigray for humanitarian aid, and the withdrawal of Eritrean forces. The government has said it views the talks as an opportunity to resolve the conflict and consolidate the improvement of the situation on the ground, apparently a reference to its military advances in Tigray. Talks will end on Sunday. Elsewhere, Somalia has executed 2 militants from the Islamic State group by a firing squad. The state-owned Somali National News Agency reported that a military court found the 2 guilty of assassinations in the capital Mogadishu and Bosaso town in northeastern Bari region. The 2 were identified as Aden Muhammad Ali Muhammad and Muhammad Ali Muhammad Farah. Local media reports said many al-Shabaab and Islamic State militants are still in prisons waiting to be executed after being sentenced to death. The Islamic State insurgents mainly operate in northeastern Puntland, where they had claimed attacks in the past. The military in Sudan, in the meantime, has fired tear gas in an attempt to stop tens of thousands of protesters marching towards the presidential palace. The protests are taking place across the country to mark the first anniversary of a coup that halted a democratic transition. Since the army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan seized power there have been near-weekly anti-coup marches. The security forces have been accused of killing more than 100 protesters in the past year. Well, let's take a look at some other stories now. If you still have the 200 Naira, 500 Naira and 1,000 Naira notes in your custody, time is ticking on its usage for any transaction, as the Central Bank of Nigeria today broke the news that it will redesign those denominations of the Naira and reissue new ones effective December the 15th. The disclosure was made by the governor of the Apex Bank, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, during a special media briefing in Abuja. He explains that following the new developments, there will be no more bank charges for deposits as the CBN mops up liquidity.
The integrity of a local legal tender, the efficiency of its supply, as well as its efficacy in the conduct of monetary policy are some of the hallmarks of a great central bank. In recent times, however, currency management has faced several daunting challenges that have continued to escalate in scale and sophistication, with attendant and unintended consequences for the integrity of both the CBN and the country at large. Mandate as enshrined in Section 2B of the CBN Act of 2007 to ensure a strong and effective legal tender. It is therefore no longer tenable to continue with business as usual, especially given the continually evolving circumstances that could impeach the optimal performance of our Naira. Furthermore, we believe that the redesign of the currency will help deepen our drive to entrench cashless economy, as it will be complemented by increased minting of our e-Naira. This will further rein in the currency outside the banking system into the banking system, thereby making monetary policy more efficacious.
A 31-year-old man, Confidence Amatobi from Isu local government area of Imo State, who is presently at large, has allegedly beaten his 2-month-old baby to the point of breaking one of the baby's arms. According to the mother of the child, Confidence was said to be acting under the influence of hard drugs, which is his addiction, and pounced on the baby because the baby was crying at night and disturbing his sleep. The suspect is at large as family members demand justice. We want to warn that some of the visuals in this report may be disturbing. This is the Federal Medical Center, Owerri, the Imo State capital. The atmosphere around the vicinity looks calm, but in Ward 13 of the children's section, there's a pitiable situation. Lying down on his bed, oblivious of the fate that has befallen him, 2-month-old Miracle Amatobi has just undergone a surgery to remove his right arm from the shoulder. Narrating the tragic events that left baby Miracle with one arm, his mother, Favor Chikwe, who hails from Anambra State, says the only sin the child committed was crying at night, which angered the father, whom she alleges was probably under the influence of hard drugs, as he took a hanger and beat the infant till he broke his arm.
We were both playing, me and my baby. So I have to excuse myself to go and ease myself, and he was crying. Okay, he was crying. I left him when he was crying. So, unknowing to me, when I left outside, I went outside and come inside. He was crying on top of his bed. For me to come inside, and I found out that he was beating the baby, and by then he has already broken his hand. This is joint here. So when he did it, he said in that car he took stick and rubber, tie it and say that two will join together. It's Listu's baby bone. That it's not going to take time for it to join.
She adds that he locked them up in a room for days after the incident, warning her not to tell anyone. The lack of medical attention made a bad situation worse.
He threatened me not to tell anybody about it. And I said, okay, based on the threatening he gave to me. Then when he was going out, he locked me inside. So on the Sunday afternoon stroke evening when he was going out, I have to come outside so that I'll report it to his neighbor.
For the attending surgeon, the team had to prioritize saving the baby's life, which led to the amputation.
We saw the child and assessed that he had gangrene of that whole limb from hand to the shoulder region, and there was nothing we could do to salvage it. So we offered amputation to save the boy's life because we didn't want the germs to go into the blood and cause, other problems for the child.
The suspect is still at large, but family members and human rights organizations are calling on security operatives and the government to ensure that he is brought to book, while the mother and child are given adequate attention and protection.
I need justice for the baby, and in the financial aspect too.
I call upon the law enforcement agency to do justice to this matter by making sure that the father whom they told us that he is at large is being searched for and apprehended and also prosecuted.
Meanwhile, police in Imo State say there's no official record or entry of the incident at any of the stations, noting that action will be taken while that is being done. According to the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law in Imo State, which was recently assented to by the state government, Section 3, Subsection 1 stipulates that a person who willfully causes or inflicts physical injury on another person by means of any weapon, substance or object commits an offence and is liable on conviction to a minimum of 2 years imprisonment. Pathetic story there. Still to come on the program. Zimbabwe expects record-breaking wheat harvest this year. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Let's get more now on our story on the Ethiopia conflict and the peace talks currently holding in South Africa. Being joined on the program by Yinka Oyiniji, Managing Partner, First Chronicles LP, for some perspective on conflicts in Africa. He joins us via Zoom from the UK. Thank you so much for joining us today on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the Ethiopian issue. Peace talks have begun in South Africa to last until the 30th of October. What do you think stakeholders and mediators seek to achieve at this summit in South Africa?
The short-term objective would be, of course, to ensure that aid and relief materials are given to the population of that country, especially in that part of the country where there has been an embargo on having access to Tigray for about a year now. It's a situation of gross humanitarian abuse, gross human rights abuse. That part of the country is plagued by famine. All right, there's no access to electricity, to internet, and to basic relief materials such as food and water. So it is imperative, as the very first objective of seeking a truce that relief agencies can access that population and then try to, make life a bit better. So we are talking about palliatives and relief materials. That embargo, right? The blockade will need to be withdrawn as a matter of extreme urgency. Everyone will be prevailing on the federal government in Ethiopia to allow access to these people who require rebuilding their towns, who require food and other relief materials. Yeah, so that's the first critical, urgent attention that needs to be achieved there.
Right, so the UN, US, and the Eastern African Regional Body have observer status at the talks in curbing this nearly 2-year conflict. What do you think their role should be in ending this crisis?
Yeah, so there are different levels of stakeholders who are involved here. I'm even pleased to see that Nigeria's former president, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, is also part of the mediators there, and it brings to bear years of military experience, of leadership, of doing the same thing in Nigeria, and then also overseeing quite a number of peacekeeping missions that Nigeria has supported in the region for quite some time. So we have local observers, we have also past presidents who are playing critical roles, and then we have foreign agencies, of course, whose help will be required to ensure that the funding that may be needed to improve relations in Ethiopia are readily available. So for the foreign nations, their role can't be more than reconciliatory and mediatory at best. But for stakeholders such as former presidents in Africa and, of course, the South African president, there would be some friendly, if I can put the word friendly force that would be necessary to prevail on the federal government of Ethiopia to stop all of these humanitarian abuses. Military men on both sides of the divide have been accused of heinous crimes. And so now is the time to extract pledges, enforceable promises to say those crimes need to stop immediately. And then also it's a problem of power sharing. All right. And as much as we want to ensure that there's true federalism everywhere that you practice federalism, to ensure that we empower any ethnic groups and entities, we must also understand that the rights of each group ends where those of others begin. So for the foreign agencies and for the foreign countries, they bear conciliatory objectives, but for past presidents or present leaders in Africa, it is more to prevail on the federal government in that country to ensure that peace reigns and that we put a stop to the crimes being experienced in this civil war of unimaginable proportions.
And so away from Ethiopia to another country battling security, Burkina Faso, where the military government has launched a drive to recruit civilians to fight jihadists with only 2 weeks of training. How will this help the nation's fight against insurgency?
It's disturbing at the very minimum. The responsibility that communities, or if you're co-creating security or co-creating peace or having a direct involvement of citizens, you cannot then shift the responsibility of the military that fights for the defense of a nation on private citizens. It is wrong on many fronts, all right? It would have been better even to invite forces from other nations across the continent or even outside of Africa to provide support, to provide logistic support to put an end to this, than to start to arm private citizens. It's wrong on so many levels. It is another massacre waiting to happen at the very minimum. Because I mean, who builds a military man within 2 weeks? It is wrong, all right? In recruitment, even into the army or into any law enforcement or military role all over the world, it takes a period of time. You are talking about allied forces to fight Boko Haram, to fight jihadists over the continent. Even the jihadists themselves were not trained within 2 weeks. How then do you transform private citizens to military men within 2 weeks? It's ridiculous at the very minimum. That means you are short-changing and you are short-circuiting the process at different levels of that, and it can't bring anything better than wanton destruction. Now, what you are trying, I can't even fathom it, okay, because number one, you are training them to bear arms. That's it. It's one level to the other, okay? After this peacekeeping is done, how do you collect those arms? Are you assimilating them into the military? These men and women who have become emergency veteran elites, are you going to reabsorb them? Are you going to mop up weapons? Are you sure that the emotional trauma, PTSDs that would necessarily follow this exercise, are you sure that it won't cause crimes of unimaginable proportions in the future to the country once these people don't have anything else to do? Are you even sure that they are properly equipped to fight this? I think that the involvement of citizens must be limited to gathering information, intelligence, passing it on to trained personnel, rather than convert. It's just a waste of life. It's a threat to life. It's an abuse of these conscripted volunteers' right to life and right to living well. Nobody conscripts anybody to get into the military. Even when you are volunteering it, you must ensure that the process is followed, that is complete. What social welfare are you going to give to their dependents now and in the future? It's wrong on so many fronts. It would have been better for Burkina Faso to be approaching the African Union, or to even approach a foreign military to say, provide support for us to be able to push terrorism away. It's not, you don't start to build private citizens into a militia to fight terrorism or insurgency. It is wrong on all fronts.
African Affairs expert Yinka Oyenije, thank you so much for your time today on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me as well.
Let's move on to other stories. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, has called for a rapid scale-up of humanitarian assistance to help avert the deteriorating humanitarian situation in drought-hit Somalia. The drought has forced thousands to flee their homes in search of food and water for their families and livestock.
There are a few projects around Somalia that UNHCR is also participating in Kismayo, here and in other places. And I think these are good models, not so difficult to replicate, relatively cost-effective, so we need to invest more with the help not only of humanitarian agencies, but of development organizations, in financial institutions, moving forward to really try to give Somalia and the people of Somalia a more hopeful future.
The special representative of the Secretary General for Libya, Abdullahi Batli, says the country's human rights situation remains concerning. A briefing the Security Council for the first time since he assumed his functions as special representative of the Secretary General and head of the United Nations Support Mission in Libya in September. He said the political deadlock persists with no clear end in sight to the prolonged stalemate over the executive.
The political deadlock persists with no clear end in sight to a prolonged stalemate over the executive. Further, effort to resolve the remaining outstanding issues related to the constitutional basis for elections do not appear to lead to concrete action by the relevant actors. In response to the near unanimous condemnation across the spectrum of the presence of mercenaries, foreign fighters and foreign forces in Libya, and the incessant foreign interference in the country's affairs, I stress to all my interlocutors that the solution to the crisis must come from inside Libya, on the basis of the will of the Libyan people. The human rights situation in Libya remains concerning. Violations against migrant and asylum seekers continue with impunity. Arbitrary detention continue as a common practice.
And Zimbabwe says it's on the brink of its biggest wheat harvest in history due to the country's efforts to overcome the global shortages of grain caused by the war in Ukraine. But bushfires and lack of rains are threatening crops yet to be harvested. Like other African countries, Zimbabwe has for decades relied on imports to offset low local production. But after Russia's invasion of Ukraine resulted in global shortages and price hikes, Deputy Agriculture Minister Vangelis Haritatos said the country wanted to ensure self-sufficiency at all costs. He said Zimbabwe expects to harvest 380,000 tons of wheat, 20,000 tons above what it consumes domestically. That's up from about 300,000 tons produced last year. That's it on Network Africa. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.